While we had the man lift rented for the shotcrete guys, we used it in the evenings to put the lath up over the Fox blocks on the garage end walls. The lift made this work really so much easier than it would have been with ladders. Fox blocks have these plastic furring strips built in every 8 inches, so we put in screws every 8 inches in both directions. Overlapping the lath at least a little is preferable, but we had not always done this with our earlier pieces. I was probably just being stingy and trying to save a little money. Just remember that these videos are more a journal of my own progress, with an opportunity to learn from my mistakes. I make no claims of expertise, at least not at the start of each learning curve. We'd work in light rain, no problem, but if it got too heavy, we'd quit and head inside, just glad that the rain was helping the shotcrete to cure. One of my biggest concerns was prepping that circular window properly. I had used these boards to form it when we poured the wall, but there was a hollow spot that didn't quite get cured right at the bottom, so I opened it up and filled it in with some of the cement left over from doing the bathroom blocks. Then we tightened up all the boards. That cement that I had was surface bonding and I had some left over, so for some odd reason I spread it out over the boards. Then we used some flexible wood strips to frame up that window. 3 layers of 1/4 inch thick luan to make a 3/4 inch stop. We sealed that with caulk on both sides. Since this would be covered in stucco, we needed to protect that wood with tar paper. I used 2 layers so that the flaps would overlap. And then we added lath for the stucco to grip. To purchase a proper 4-foot window would cost about $1,000, so I used a $50 piece of 1/4 inch clear UV stable polycarbonate Lexan. It actually has an R value that is actually very similar to a double pane window. It was meant as a temporary solution here, but maybe I'll just leave it that way. Here's the view of the outside. It's all ready for stucco. It took about a month before the stucco guys could come out. I had taken the day off work to be there, so I was a little disappointed that things didn't get rolling very quickly. It wasn't until after lunch that they started by unloading that scaffolding, and then one guy left again to get more supplies, and the other guy stayed to work on prep. I'm narrating this video so long after that I can't actually remember their names. Anyway, they said we'd done a good job of securing the lath, but they still needed to add some J-trim pieces along the bottom edge. This seemed to take the longest around the columns because of all the cutting and because those Fox blocks don't really provide a good attachment point along that bottom edge of a short block. It's much cheaper to mix stucco than to buy pre-mixed bags. I'm not exactly sure what special recipe these guys were using, but a typical scratch mix would be 1 bag of Portland cement mixed with 1/3 a bag of lime and 5 buckets, or about 25 gallons of sand. Then they just mixed it all in a cut-off plastic barrel with a drill mixer. The second day they had put up the scaffolding and were working on the top of the wall by the time Sherry arrived. You can see some guys prepping the surface and others applying the scratch coat, and someone mixing a batch whenever they need to. The scaffolding was ideal because it allowed them to cantilever boards out to get near the wall, and then easily remove them or pull them back in so they wouldn't be in the way when they didn't want them there, all without having to move the actual whole scaffolding structure. I was at my work during most of this excitement, but managed to come out at the end of most days to check on the progress. Here Sherry's inspecting the scratch coat, and she's probably glad that she didn't have to do it all. Basically, this first coat is 3/8 of an inch thick, and it holds onto the lath. They add these scratches at the end so the next layer can grip this one easily. The white spot in the middle is just a taped over electric box with for one of the lights on the front of the garage. Here's a corner from the north side door, and here's the north side. So progress all around. The next day they came back and started with the stone arch detail. These were like those kind of like fake stone corner pieces, so not really wedge shaped, but the arch is so slight that it worked. They mortared them in place very slowly. I think they'd already figured out the placement before I got there. Either that or they were very lucky because it fit perfectly. No more brown coat work until these set up properly. These thin wood boards that they're prepping are their secret for hard corners. Basically, they attach them to one side of each corner, and then they can brown coat right up to the edge of them and get a nice sharp edge. They came back the next day to work on the brown coat with a couple extra guys. You can see those thin boards attached to the sides of the columns there for those hard corners. Meanwhile, this guy's carefully adding grout between all the stones. These guys are pros, so they apply the stucco with a hawk and a trowel, and they use that larger two-handed derby to make it plumb and flat. Then they add some more to fill in those low spots, derby it again, and iterate until the wall looks really good. That final finish is done with a hard rubber float that opens up the pores in the preparation for the final coat. I looked at my time-stamped time-lapse pictures, and I see that that left section there took about 2 hours to complete. Brown coat is a slightly different recipe than scratch coat. Usually it's about 10% more lime and sand, so it's just a little bit weaker. The idea is that if something is going to crack, it should be the brown coat, not the scratch coat that's holding onto the wall. Then you're supposed to give the brown coat lots of time, like 2 weeks to a month, to crack before adding that final coat over the top of it. Now it's time to point the stones and clean up that grout. I thought they did a really nice job. When it's time to brown coat the sides of those columns, they start by removing those thin boards. You can see that that sharp corner they created with the side brown coat remains, and then they can trowel up to that and get the other sharp corner. "7 feet up, and the day is done." They finished the remaining 2/3 of the brown coat on the front the next day, but I didn't get much footage. 6 days later, they came back and finished the north side brown coat, and then they gave a few more days for the brown coat to set. Then 3 days later, when we came out, we were surprised to see that that whole finish coat was done. They must have done it the previous day. They did a really great job on that circular window edge. I wish I had been there to see how they applied this finish. I think the trick is in the special aggregate that moves around and makes this worm finish during that final floating. Then a couple days later we came back and all the scaffolding was gone. It was like the work was doing itself. Everything looks very nice and flat and plumb. I'm just a little bit concerned about the short time between the brown coat and the final coat in some areas, especially on that north side, because all the books say to leave 14 to 28 days, and I think it was more like 3, or in some spots even less. Then I mounted the lights, added the copper flashing, etc. I'll post a separate video on how I made those copper shingles later.